Deaths are bound to happen in comics, where the fate of the world is often at stake, and where not all of our villains and our heroes are completely invulnerable. Even invulnerable characters, given the right circumstances, actually become vulnerable, so there's also that. And then there's all the normal human characters milling about. In DC, although we sometimes see death coming from a mile away, there are others that sneak up on us, lurking just around the corner to leave us shocked and sometimes even outraged. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. Today we'll be counting down the top 10 DC deaths nobody saw coming. Even some of these characters themselves were caught off guard with just how dire their circumstances had become. If you're a fan of the unexpected and possibly unknown, click over here to check out our top 10 Marvel characters you've never heard of, and become amazed at the ongoing existence and in some cases importance of some of these lesser known characters. Stick around to the end of this list as well, where I will have some bonus content coming your way. Alright, now let's get counting. Number 10. Vandal Savage. So this one comes to us from the alternate world belonging to Deceased. You might be thinking, but wait a minute Amanda, isn't it a given that these characters in Deceased will die? It's deceased after all, and this world is filled with anti-life equation zombies. And yes, it is a given. But just because we know they're going to die doesn't mean the way that their death comes about or the sheer terror of how it happens can't surprise and astound us. That is exactly the case for villain Vandal Savage, part of one of the groups we follow in the Deceased Unkillable series. It turns out Vandal himself was, well, not so unkillable when Wonder Woman catches the ancient immortal off guard, busting in and almost insta-killing him before he even has time to properly react by ripping him in half. The psh is the blood splatter. Number 9. Jason Todd. I'm ranking this one low because we really all should have known to expect this death, and yet somehow we didn't. Jason's reception as a character was rocky, and it was because of this that DC contemplated killing his character off altogether. To decide, they put out a bulletin in their comics asking people to call in and vote as to whether or not Jason Todd would survive or die during the story arc Death in the Family. People voted, but not thinking their vote would actually matter. They never thought DC would actually just kill Jason Todd because of a fan poll, and yet that is exactly what they did. Jason died and fans were left flabbergasted despite the fact that some of them had actually sealed his fate. Number 8. Superman. Well, this might not seem as shocking now. When Death of Superman first came out, it was so unexpected it made real world headlines. News was out that Superman was dead, one of comics' most iconic heroes of all time. How did that happen? The new and unstoppable villain Doomsday appeared on the scene, and Superman was forced to put a stop to him. Or try, at least. Superman succeeded, but at the cost of his life, with both hero and villain appearing to die of their injuries in the comic. The pitch for this story evolved out of a joke regarding ideas for how to boost sales, which it actually ended up successfully doing. The comic Death of Superman sold like hotcakes, and also helped to boost sales for Superman's return story in Reign of the Supermen. Number 7. Elongated Man. This is one of those deaths where it felt like Sue Dibney, Elongated Man's wife, had died, and comic writers felt therefore he should die also? To, I guess, keep the married couple together? You get married together, you live together, you die together? Is that what you promise when you get married to someone? Sue died in identity crisis. Her murder was the mystery readers watched the heroes unravel and attempt to solve. Shortly after, Elongated Man Ralph Dibney attempted to resurrect her and then had to fight Felix Faust, who was disguised as Nabu, but who apparently Ralph knew was actually Faust the entire time. These two fight, the Elongated Man dies, and Faust becomes imprisoned. All that so Sue and Ralph really can be together and become ghost detectives. Nope, I'm not kidding. Number 6. Green Arrow. Remember that time Oliver Queen died because he didn't want to sacrifice his arm to live? Yep. Also, why did he even have to stick his arm in this bomb in the first place? Seems like a bad move. I don't know why he really chose to do that. It's a little unclear to me in that comic. In Green Arrow issues 99 to 101, we are taken on this roller coaster of an illogical ride that ultimately ends in Ollie's death. He has his hand in a Russian bomb, and rather than let Superman deal with it any other way, he chooses to die. I don't think anyone would have expected that choice from Green Arrow, and yet one of the best strategies they came up with, well, more Superman came up with, because at this point Ollie's pretty much ready to give up it seems, is to remove Oliver's arm and fly him to safety, and then I guess return to secure the bomb before it explodes, with Green Arrow's arm still keeping the dead man switch safely in place. assuming that would work. It isn't that Ollie wants to risk that this plan might not work though, he just doesn't want to sacrifice his arm in order to live. And so he dies. I guess if you shoot arrows with your arm, you're like, how will I live without shooting arrows? There's a lot of other things you could do, Oliver. Number 5. Blue Beetle. Blue Beetle was one of the most shocking deaths because of who was pulling the trigger. At this point we might now see Maxwell Lord as a dangerous and more villainous figure not to be messed with, but at the time he was believed to be an ally of the Justice League, not someone who would betray them. So this death caught many off guard. What had happened was that Blue Beetle discovered that Lord had been against them the whole time and was using his position to gather intel on superheroes and basically destroy the Justice League International from the inside out. Maxwell still seemed to see Blue Beetle as a friend though, as he did offer him the chance to join him and protect the world against the superhuman threat. But Ted Kord refused and as such was killed by Lord. Number 4. Silver St. Cloud. This death was very shocking at the time, although to be fair, we should know that if it seems like Batman is about to get a happily ever after moment, it's too good to be true. And something is likely about to go sideways. Such was the case with Silver St. Cloud. Silver was a Gotham socialite who dated Bruce Wayne way back in the 70s in the comics, but the two ended up splitting when she learned that Bruce Wayne was actually Batman. Silver couldn't stand the thought of losing Bruce and of him constantly being in danger. Years later, however, she would walk back into Bruce's life and end up back in his arms once more, ready to accept and come to understand and respect his responsibilities as Batman. Bruce even considered hanging up his cowl and retiring from the vigilante life for Silver so that they could start a life all their own together. Unfortunately, just as this seemed like it would be a reality, Batman's new partner, Baphomet, was revealed to be villain Automatopoeia, tragically killing Silver instantly with a slit while Bruce's back was turned. Just, Batman, if you're ever gonna be happy, don't trust it. Number 3. Batman. This one is pretty recent, so if you don't want some recent going-ons of the comics to be spoiled, you might want to skip this point. Alright, now that you've been warned, let's continue on. Recently in Death Metal, our heroes have discovered the Perpetua is planning to harness the energy of 3 major DC crises by building them again and making them recur. As such, Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman each set out 2 separate ones with the hopes of saving those lives endangered by this plot. Black Lantern Batman is tasked with handling Crisis on Infinite Earths, but realizes shortly after arriving that he's already too late. He finds himself coming undone, dissolving into antimatter. It's a brutal page, but what's more unexpected is a few pages later when all our heroes are all back to normal and together again. What? Number 2. Poison Ivy. Ivy's death in Heroes in Crisis literally came out of nowhere, and if no one saw it coming, it's just because of how fast it happened. Huh, pun intended. Ivy was one of the few killed in the Sanctuary Massacre, accidentally killed by hero Wally West when he lost control. Fortunately, Wally was able to bring Ivy back using a rose she'd given to Harley Quinn in order to, in essence, regrow her. She came back with a whole new look as well. However, even though her death ended up being temporary, it was still pretty shocking and unexpected, considering how popular Poison Ivy has been throughout comics as both a villain and an anti-hero. Number 1. Alex DeWitt. If you read comics of any kind, you'll likely know who Alex DeWitt is. Her name has become almost synonymous with the comic book term fridging, coined by writer Gail Simone. The term even has its own website, which Simone made in 1999 for the sole purpose of documenting various other times women in comics were fridged. In other words, female characters being sacrificed, depowered, or assaulted for the advancement of a male character's plot. Alexandra DeWitt, known for being Kyle Rayner's girlfriend, was one of the most shocking deaths of this kind that helped to basically highlight the way female characters were often used and treated in comics. Alex was killed by Major Force, a villain who strangled her and then stuffed her in the fridge, leaving her for Kyle to find upon his return. Unexpected for many. Thank you so much for watching. What are some of the deaths that caught you off guard? Who are some characters that you would love to see get killed off? Are there any comic book deaths that gave you so much nerd rage that you wish they could be undone? Let us know in the comments below. And speaking of comments, it's time to turn to some comments from one of our latest videos, Top 10 X-Men 10 of Swords Facts You Need to Know. Josh A comments, this is basically Hickman's Infinity-like story but with X-Men. We won't see his run on X-Men end here, it's got a couple years left. I hope so. I'm enjoying the Dawn of X line so much. I never want it to end. Just Henry writes, I swear the devil is in the details on this channel. Great content, but it's not powers of X, it's powers of 10 as well. This is like the guy who can't say McTaggart. You are right, it is powers of 10, but that was an explanation I just didn't really want to get into for that video, as there have been multiple times I've said 10 or X and been corrected both ways, so yeah, that's a whole thing. And the explanation for powers of 10 is different from 10 of swords, so it's kind of a whole other point of itself. At the end of the day, pronunciations aren't really a huge deal in my opinion either. If you love something, I'm more interested in your love and your enthusiasm for a comic series, a character, a place, an event, than I am in how you pronounce or perhaps mispronounce some of that stuff. It's nice to understand the reasoning behind pronunciations though, because it's just interesting and neat. For powers of 10, I believe we are referring to a few different things, but namely the timeline of the mutants in measures of scale. A timeline using multipliers for measurements. Times 1, times 2, times 3, that kind of thing. And that's all the time we have for comments today. Be sure to comment below for a chance to have your thoughts and feels shouted out in a future list. This has been Top 10 Nerd, and I'm your host Amanda McKnight, reminding you as always to stay nerdy, YouTube.